You know, thank you for riding the bus that I have to join with you. You have now incredible conference here. You know, we have a taste on Beersheba, but I think after you saw what we have here, I think I can persuade you that the next conference, you will have in Beersheba, people come from all over the world here, and we go see other things, and the focus will be Beersheba, because I told you that should be the focus of Israel, and it will. So I thank you so much, and I want to bring now the chairmanship to Professor Dov Shinar, the head of the Buddha Center, and also I acknowledge there's so many great people that I want to acknowledge, but I'm very much glad that my good friend Yoel Esteron, that made in Chadashot and Haaretz a great success, and will go from power to power. I don't know, it's next with Zaz. Yoel Esteron, welcome. Thank you.
Right. Good. Thank you. Oh, radio, Deutsche Welle. Thank you, Avishai. On behalf of the Hubert Burda Center for Innovative Communications, Bruchim Habayim, blessed are you who arrive, to use Professor Braverman's words. I will not say much. I want to turn the leadership to David Witztum from Israel Television Channel 1. But only one remark. Outside, just outside this hall, if we have time, after that, I recommend that you see the wonderful exhibit, interesting exhibit on war and soldiers, which is tied on directly with the topic of this event. And I hope that both will leave the right impression on all of us. So, Dudu Witztum, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dov. On behalf of the Yuval Burda Center for Innovative Communications, I'm glad to open this session. And I think this is the only official formal statement that will be made on this panel, so I hope, because of the shortage of time, I will give up any opening comments that I have. Perhaps I'll return it for later, because we have many panelists here and very attentive, interactive audience, we hope, on the other side, and the time is very short and limited. I think we should start right away, and we'll do it like on the order, from the picture, from the image, to the analysis and consequences, implications of that image, of images of war of images. So without further ado, I call on Micha Bar'am to start. 5 minutes, please. So Micha Bar'am is an internationally acclaimed journalist, photojournalist, and curator in Israel, and he will start and speak about the dilemmas with the camera in the field.
After last night's wizardry in Feature Restaurant, and after the hectic day of that you've had yesterday, I hope you have the patience for someone who comes from the classic world. I will show you in a moment a few slides on the little screen. I am coming to raise a few issues that have to do with images, with the ethics and the aesthetics from the point of view of somebody who is maybe a content provider of the media industry, a recorder, a chronicler, and I have about 50 years of experience in the field. I'm not an academic, I'm a self-taught photographer, and I hate to be put into the niche of war photographer, because I just photographed what happened in my courtyard. It just so happens that since 1948, the only war where I fought and didn't photograph, I have a large collection of which I will show you only a little bit of the images that I took. I would rather like to see myself as a cultural anthropologist and try with a non-political agenda to capture the life around me in images. It just so happened that life was quite hectic and sometimes violent. I was influenced and I adopted the saying of Robert Capa, who, the famous war photographer, who was killed exactly this week 50 years ago in Indochina, May 25. He was a victim of his passion for photography and tried to change the world maybe through photographs. His saying was, if your pictures are not good enough, you are not close enough. And I would like to add my little addendum and say, if you are too close, then your nose is too close to the grindstone and you lose perspective. And I will try to show a few of the photographs that I think seared into our memory and became iconic images. The photo is never the thing itself, but always the ghost of a reality. There is something with this thing, we think it is transparent, but we're not in a symposium over photography, but I would also like to say something else. I believe in it. This old cliché of a picture being worth 1,000 words is really too used and too old, and it's such a cliché that I would like to say every photograph needs 1,000 words to explain the background, to put it into context. And those still photographs, which in German you could say stumme Bilder, really can speak louder than 1,000 words if you put those fragments into some meaningful context. There are many dilemmas about photographing war and images of war. And one of them I will tell you because I heard it from the late George Roger, one of the founders of Magnum. When he reached, as a photographer of life and picture post, he reached Bergen-Belsen and had lifted his camera to photograph the heap of bodies there. He said he has to stop to photograph because this is one of the most irrational activities of the American airplanes, the dead soldiers being brought to the States, whether it is from Abu Ghraib prison. Today there is a digital camera everywhere, and the role of the professional photojournalist is slowly diminishing, and I would say it has to push photojournalists and journalists into a more moral position to take on what they would like to show the world. Everybody today understands what the media is about. And I just want to end this section with a small example that happened to me and one of my colleagues. Not very far from here, a house was blown up as a result of a terror activity. And when we came to this house to photograph, out of the ruins came a woman shouting, yelling, tearing out her hair like every Oriental mourner does, very loud. And then her son comes to her and says, Yamma, mother, don't worry about those still photographers. Save your voice until the television will come. I'm telling you this sad story because today everybody knows how they want to manipulate the press, including simple farmers in their deep sorrow. I will like to show you some photographs. I'm coming from the classic, traditional, non-digital world, and I will try to do it from here. It's on the small screen. And we will just try to dim the lights a little bit. But Ami, can you? Thank you. Now, this is a stupid button in the tradition of the American button campaigns, which was given out by the Foreign Press Association in Israel. You can read and smile together with me. I trust iconic photographs, really seared, branded into our visual memory. Maybe one of the most famous of our century is Robert Capa's 1936 picture titled The Falling of a Republican Soldier. Without going into that deeply, I'll just try to jump from frame to frame and bring up the issues which maybe later we can discuss on the panel. This is supposedly to be the moment of the death of a Spanish soldier, the moment he was hit by a bullet. But, of course, not long after, there are immediately iconoclasts who try to shatter the image of the famous, legendary, mythological Robert Capa, and somebody says, yes, but this image was staged. Now, we don't go into that discussion. To me, what is important today, visually, it brands into your memory. And it doesn't really matter from now on whether it was staged or maybe not. Another photograph of Robert Capa, which became the real key photograph of the landing Normandy beach, in spite of the fuzzy development, which was due to a mistake of a lab man in London who opened the warm water and not the cold water. After Robert Capa risked his life, you can see what it ended up, and in spite of the fact that it is really very fuzzy, it was another one of those iconic photographs of Robert Capa. The raising of the flag or Old Glory on Mount Suribachi. The actual raising was at night. This was restaged, but you can immediately analyze why this diagonal, typical classic form of the raising of the flag and the fact that all the soldiers are without faces. They became forever part of this historic photograph, which is maybe the widely spread poster in the American scene, even though it was a slight reconstruction after the fact. You probably know this famous photograph of Yevgeny Khaldei, May 1945 in Berlin. Of course, it's a long story which I can't go into, how he flew back from Berlin, took a friend, a tailor, 2 tablecloths, red tablecloths, flew back, and he knew exactly where he wants to photograph this flag being raised. But there is something else in that photograph, and that is that Yevgeny Khaldei was told he cannot publish this photograph. I'll go fast. Look at the hand which holds the soldier. The hand shows 2 watches on every hand, and a Russian soldier doesn't rob. I realize I have to go fast now. I will really go by 2 seconds for every image. Iconic images, very clear, Judeo-Christian tradition. Budapest Rebellion, another icon. Nactway, Nicaragua, Crucifixion and Pietà. Gene Smith, Pietà Minimata. Some places don't need people. Execution place in Berlin, Gestapo. in Paris Gestapo. Some need no explanation. The cormorant from the first Gulf War. A propaganda of the Iranians in their war against, it's a book, I can show you, I have the book here. Rwanda, Gilles Perez, some want to show the horror and some just want to put them in boxes and say, I don't want to show the images. This is another ethical issue. In Israel now, of course, the war of the images, the war of the X's annihilated, the media in Haiti, the media in Jerusalem showing up for the staged scene, Hezbollah inviting photographers, Robert Capa photograph of immigrant child was used in a PLO publication to show that is the plight of the Palestinians. It was an Israeli, a Jew. Okay, I'll just go through the slides. We have no more time. The reading of the blonde. And now, this is now just a few photographs of mine which I took through the years. And we will raise all the issues afterwards. My most famous picture from the Yom Kippur War, Egyptian prisoners of war and Israeli soldiers, ghosts, press conference like a puppet show.
Micha, sorry, we have to finish.
Okay, אני בשלוש האחרונות. And this is for Beersheba, just 3 photographs from Beersheba, a parade in Beersheba, and Ben-Gurion in the Negev desert, walking into the sunset like Charlie Chaplin, an aerial next to Beersheba University, and the mummy which capsulates the shadow and the body, and my best war photograph taken during a film set in Jerusalem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Micha. And I do ask the other participants really not to take Micha's example, because otherwise we'll be here till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I ask Oded Ben-Ami, who is a correspondent and anchor with the second channel in Israel and a spokesman for the Israeli army before.
Okay.
Oded, yeah, sure.
Sure. Good morning. Since this is my time, and I'm not going to take Micha's example. First of all, Professor Braverman, it's always joyful to visit here, especially in this wonderful Senate Hall. Fantastic. I have only 4 short opening remarks, and since I enjoy the fact of being a journalist, an active journalist, and I crossed the lines for 7 years when I was the media advisor to the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and then for 4.5 years as the chief spokesperson of the Israeli Defense Forces. I would like first to assure you that whatever the image or the photo or the video footage it is not affecting absolutely the combatants. The combatants are not exposed to the photo or to the footage. They are busy fighting, which is very good. Now, I think that the duty of the media is to come up with an image, an icon, a photograph or a footage, and to put it on the desk of the public discussion and to let the public discuss over the reality. For this, I would like to give a fresh example of a fresh photo and what it does to the Israeli public discussion. And this is a photo taken by photographer Barkai Wolfson of the Daily Ma'ariv just recently. Can I get it? This is a photo And if we'll dim out the lights a little bit, I'll explain to you what we are seeing here. This is what we call the Philadelphia path. This is the borderline between Israel and the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Right after a armored vehicle with 5 soldiers, Israeli soldiers, detonated on a 1.5 ton of explosive, and a group of soldiers were asked to crawl over the path to look for the remains of the soldiers. Now this is the image that came into the Israeli public discussion. And what happened? In one hand, you will find those who say this is a very important part of the Israeli epos. This is the emblem, the symbol of friendship, of the commitment of one combatant to another. No matter what, I'll never leave you in the battlefield. I'll do whatever I have, even endangering myself, to look for you or for your remains in order to bring you back home. This is in one hand. But there were those in the Israeli society who would say, and what happened to the deterrence of Israel? To see Israeli soldiers crawling. We lost our deterrence. And what about the fact that Israeli soldiers are endangering themselves in order to find the remains of dead Israeli soldiers? Are we getting over a process of Islamization of the Israeli society? You know, in the Islam, the whole idea of the shihada, where the dead is much more important than the live. This is exactly what we see here. So this is a glorification of the dead. And this was the part of the public discussion among those who opposed what happened on the Philadelphia path. Now, I would say that the revolution of the openness of the modern era, where photographers and TV crew can be on the spot, right where the news are, and to bring the reality into the home of the civilians, this is a real revolution. And this is the duty of the media today, to bring the reality back home. Look what happened in Vietnam. Once the reality of Vietnam came into the average American home, the attitude of the American public towards the war absolutely changed. This is the same with us. Once Hezbollah in Lebanon established Al-Manar TV, and they showed to the Israeli public for the first time our armored vehicle exploded, or a military post being exploded by Hezbollah, it changed the attitude of Israelis to the fact that we are there in Lebanon. Take, for instance, the ritual of showing the photo of the Israeli air navigator Ron Arad with his 2-year daughter on his shoulder. It made the whole issue of bringing back this airman much more personal because of the icon. Take, for instance, the fact that Hezbollah used TV crews from all over the world to show the remains of one Israeli Navy SEAL combatant, Sergeant Major Itamar Ilya. They showed holding his remains, his part of his tissues. And this is for the first time when the Israeli public said, yes, we are ready to pay whatever is needed to bring his remains back home. Or in Gaza, I'm sure you all remember the Muhammad Dura, this young boy who actually caught between firecross in Gaza. Actually, this image started the war between Israel and the world media, and made the world aware to what is going on in the beginning of the Intifada. So to sum up, I would say that the job of the combatants is to fight, while the job of the media is not to make the news, but to report them, to bring the news back home to the table of the public discussion, and once we do this job, then we are making our duty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oded, and thank you very much for keeping to time. And I now invite Dagmar Engel, who's editor-in-chief in Deutsche Welle TV, Germany. Please.
I'm happy to be here. I don't have a microphone. On purpose. Thank you. No, it's not possible. Oh, I just thought you would rip it out and give it. No, it's fine with me. And it's good for me to just to speak directly after you, because you already have said what I think is the most important for the media. I think you said there should be a moral impetus in reporting and photo shooting and for journalists, and of course we have to have the usual values, but we are not out there to judge what's right or what's wrong. We are there to gather the images, the footage, and we have to know a lot to put it out in a fair way. I think images in an asymmetric war are the better weapon for the weaker, because everybody's heart is with the victim, and when you can show victims, you have the emotions, and when you have the emotions, you have your audience. And I think where we really failed in the last months is to be more fair and to be more accurate. I think the title of this discussion is War of Images, Images of War, and we have learned that the images are so important for the reporting, because we all knew months, almost a year ago, we already knew that there are prisoners tortured in Iraq, and some of us told it, and we reported it with verbal, just on linguistic, in a linguistic way, but as there were no pictures, it got lost, and it came back with unbelievable power when we had the first picture. I have some pictures here, but I guess it's in everybody's mind. The person who is hooded and on electric cables, and I think that's the icon of this gruesome. Excuse me?
The top of the Last Economist, you know.
Yeah. I think everybody knows that picture, and I think everybody knows the picture of the year. This Iraqi prisoner of war with the little boy on his side. You remember that? You don't? Maybe we could just put it in there. It's a simple JPEG. And it's a lot of pictures in there. So, sorry, I have to go over there and use another microphone. Microphone user. Speak from. Okay. That's it, yeah. And it's a picture.
Show me, I don't know.
There. Well, press. No, before.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on a sec. This is the World Press photo, and it's a great picture. But where was the uproar? Where was the uproar that it's in the convention of the Hague Convention and the Geneva Convention? It's not allowed to put bags over the head of prisoners of war. We all loved this picture because it's beautiful. It's showing war and love and sort of he was allowed to keep his son in his arms. But we're we were just loved this the aesthetics, but we didn't go on with just asking what's behind that. So there's one last sentence. Do I already have my 5 minutes hand? What I think international media or international transnational television is, it's much more easier for them. On one way, it's harder to air into all the world where everybody is audience and everybody knows what you are airing. So when we are reporting from Israel, it's almost 2 minutes and the first call comes and they say, hey, that's not true. That's too partial on the side of the Palestinians. And when the line's free, the next call comes through and an Arab is calling and saying, hey, that's not true. What you're telling us, it's too partial on the side of the Israelis. So there might be a chance, just open. I agree with you when you say I believe in the public. I believe in the public discussion. And I think the good thing, there are bad things and good things about this digital revolution. One, the bad thing is you can't control anything anymore, and the good thing is you can't control anything anymore.
Thank you very much. Now I just want to ask the participants to look at the other side, more the academic side of things, and just add one thing to the discussion. We have been talking about war of images and images of war. We can now, I think, widen it a bit to include terror as a phenomenon. And a recent book published, for example, in Germany is called Bilder des Terrors, Terror der Bilder, which is, again, a kind of play on names. But it is a real discussion, which some people like Ted Koppel and others, when they call the people who produce the pictures, journalists, second-hand terrorists. Are we participants? Are we taking the pictures? Are we providing public space? What really are we doing there? So first, for the analysis of the picture, I would like to invite Dr. Paul Frosch of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Can you hear me? Thank you. There are really 2 points that I want to raise, more cautionary notes than arguments. The first is that there is a tendency to decontextualize and fetishize visual images, to grant them independent power, separate from their particular communicative and cultural contexts. Now, the 2 great historical forms of this decontextualization within the West are iconophilia and iconoclasm, the love of images and the suspicion and even dread of images. And I want to say that we should try and avoid both, and I think this is what Micha Ba'am was partly saying. I want to argue that sweeping claims about the uniquely or predominantly visual nature of the modern or postmodern era, of the primacy of image over word, of the unique power of images over their viewers, and other such claims, should be treated with a great deal of skepticism, especially if such claims about images are made in contradistinction to words. I endorse W.J.T. Mitchell's idea that there is no uniquely visual era, but that the pictorial turn, as he calls it, is a cultural trope which tends to turn images, simply because they are images, into either our saviors or our downfall. We should think contextually and historically about the so-called power of images, rather than ontologically. And in a way, I think this is happening in the public sphere. So far, the discussion in the UK about the objectivity or falsehood of the pictures taken of the abuse of Iraqi prisoners has both raised the question of photographic objectivity as public debate, but also raised another question. Just because the pictures are false, does it mean that there is no abuse? In other words, the connection between seeing and knowing, which in many respects seems to be so natural, has come into question. So ultimately, I don't think so much that it is the symbolic forms specifically connected to picturing or visualization which are primarily transforming our cultural environment, especially our knowledge of war, but rather the ways in which verbal, acoustic, and visual media are combined to achieve effects of presence and liveness that purportedly speak for themselves. And this is the second point that I want to make, that the domain of liveness and presence has been enlarged, particularly in the reporting of war. Now, liveness has long been a core characteristic of radio and television broadcasting. What we are witnessing now, however, is an intensification, not only of the use of live broadcasting technologies, but in the cultural value of liveness itself, as a way of offsetting the perpetual epistemological problem of mediated discourse, that we, the addressees, the viewers and the hearers, are not and cannot be there at the event being described. Effects of temporal simultaneity are employed to compensate for spatial and experiential distance. In the last Gulf War, the use of live link-ups to embedded journalists at the scene of conflict, when all we can see is a blurred green figure describing the immediacy of a battle neither the journalist nor the viewers can comprehend, is a key instance of this intensification, in which, to be honest, technologies of visualization are at their most primitive. This is actually an advantage because it signifies authenticity. This is also true of the reporting of terrorist attacks. אפשר לראות את הוידאו עכשיו? I want to show you a clip from a video, report on Israeli Channel 2 News, taken from a suicide bombing of a bus at a junction in Jerusalem called Pat. And you'll see a very brief introduction by the anchor. I hope we're going to get the video. Very brief introduction by the anchor in Hebrew, where she basically sets up the scene quite dramatically. Hello, Mom.
That's very dramatic, I would say.
The hostages or the victims?
אתמול בעקבות התראה ממוקדת ואף העלתה מסוק לאוויר, אבל כל זה לא הועיל. כמה דקות לפני השעה 8 החריד הפיצוץ את ירושלים, והתופת שממנה כה חששו התרחשה. זה דיווחו של כתבנו לענייני משטרה, משה נוסבאום.
אחרי הפוגה קצרה חוזרת ירושלים אל המראות האלה שלעולם לא ניתן להתרגל אליהם. הפעם
Just by way of context, the suicide bombing happened early in the morning. The report is at 8 o'clock on the 8 o'clock news in the evening. A whole day has passed during which that piece has been carefully edited. Okay. Nevertheless, what we see there are seemingly instances of raw footage, sound and visuals, and a present tense commentary. For those of you who don't speak Hebrew, the voiceover of the journalist starts in the present tense and continues for some time into the story to describe what's happening. This creates the effect of a dramatic presentness at the event, even when all we see and hear is actually the aftermath of the event, and even when the raw footage has in fact been elaborately edited and choreographed to achieve the effect of rawness. Such developments signal the continued rise of an ideology of presentness, liveness and rawness, an epistemology of experience at the center of media practices today. My claim is not that this is new, but rather that instead of informing and enriching other media epistemologies, the provision of information, the enabling of critique, the ideology of liveness and the epistemology of experience are in danger of becoming the default mode of war and conflict reporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Frosch. I just want to add to it because that this shows also the very, very big effect of what is called terror marathons, the live broadcast of the terror when it happens. So even the evening news try to copy, to imitate the kind of rawness that we have seen and we are seeing very frequently in these terror marathons that are broadcast in Israel the whole time. I invite now to speak Stephanie Cherny, who is the Corporate Strategy Director at the Hubert Burda Media Germany.
Hello. Before I start my very, very short remark, Let me look at the audience. Who have we sit here? Whom I'm addressing? Whom do we address our very interesting notes? We have students here. We have a publisher here. We have a director of a president of a university here. We have a lot of teachers here. We have businessmen. We have media managers, philosophers, art historians. How do we deal with these questions coming up at these panels? What do we get out? What are the pragmatic things and thoughts we can get out of this? For me, as a trained journalist and as a media manager, I'm working at Hubert Buddha Media, and as a mother of 4 kids, there's one thing we should take. One thing I brought out of this here: we should teach our children how to deal with images. At the very, very beginning, we should bring journalists, we should bring teachers in the kindergartens, in the elementary schools, in the gymnasiums, high schools, to give them a media competence, to let them know what they see. They see every day, they see at their video computers, at their TV sessions, they see a lot of images of war, which is not war. They have a hard time to differentiate between the real war and the wrong wars in their movies, in their comics, in their, you know it all. So I think we should all work together to educate the young generation. You students here sitting in the last row, please go out of the university and try to educate your sisters, younger sisters, to bring it in schools, that what it means to differentiate, to look at pictures. That's my remark.
Thank you very much. It reminds me that how difficult it is, for example, at the university, to add the visual nature of studies, to get into visuals. We just talked to Professor Ozel-Mog before that, how visual images are lost, are not open to the public, not accessible, not learned, not studied enough. And I think that advice is very well, and I think, I hope universities here in Israel will heed and will learn it. So I invite Ozel-Mog to speak, please.
Good morning to everyone.
Mike.
I don't have a constructed lecture. I'm just going to bring out some few remarks about not about war, but about images and sociography and historiography. I think that we as historians and sociologists, most of our analysis consists of literary documents, printed, written documents, and the method of analyzing pictures is pretty new and very seldom used in historiographical analysis, particularly in Israel. I think the reason for it, first of all, is because the historian's tendency to look at the history as a sort of or historiography as a sort of a trial, looking for the truth in documents of statesmen, of generals, and not analyzing pictures, images. Of course, the number of documents that are in the archives, is part of the reason most of the images are stored in the private archives, and it's, as Duda said, it's very hard to have the permission to enter those archives. And I think it's a little bit more difficult and demanding to analyze pictures, and you need a method
I'm working now on a new book about the history of the daily life of Israeli society, and I want to give you an example. It's a book about malls and telephones and motor cars and those things. And of course, you can't use protocols, only protocols, to analyze. You need pictures, you need images to understand the development of this subject. So I'm going to give you an example of images that analyze picture of the kiosks, the different kiosks in Israeli society, and you see that it's very important. Anyway, you don't have other data to analyze beside those pictures. Look at the picture of the first kiosk in Tel Aviv in 1910, and then the kiosk in 1927, 34. You can see that in 46. Here you have a kiosk with a new device, and of course products are different. You can see from the images. Just go through very quickly, and then the 50s, 52. 57, 58, and then you have more concrete, bigger kiosks and newspapers coming to one of the products of the kiosk, and 64, again 64, 65, and then the new kiosk. Pizzutzia, as we say. I can't translate it to English. I'm just going to bring you very briefly. I use images with my analysis, and we use the method of semiology. To understand how image works on your brain, you have to understand the chain of association. That's how we analyze the effects, the emotional effects, the intellectual effects of images, because the brain processes the information in a chain of association. Let me give an example. I analyzed the war memorials of Israel. The rate of war memorials in Israel is the highest in the world, per capita and per fallens. And of course, it's a very genuine reflection not only of the grief culture of Israeli society, but also of the culture, Israeli culture in general. So let me give you an example. Look at the typical monuments. We have two types: the bigger one, and then the smaller one. Now, had I known that I'm going to speak in English, I would have brought you some different information. I got to use just a second. Just a second. I'm going to show you the drafts, the notes that I used when analyzing the. Of course, it's in Hebrew. I apologize for those who don't understand reading Hebrew, but just give you an illustration of my laboratory. For example, most of the monuments are made of stones, so you can see how the association. It's just note that I wrote. If you have the stone as a stiff material, it represents the power, and then the power of the fallen, and then it has an association of a commitment. Let me give you another association, chain of association. For example, when you have a stone taken from the field, it associates with naturality or simpleness, and of course of being blunt, direct. If you use stones from the place, it represents the landscape of the homeland, being rooted in the homeland. That's how it works. You analyze the chain of association from first degree, second degree, third degree, and then you can actually understand the social psyche of the society. So in order to understand values, you got to deconstruct the chain of association that we actually get the stimuli, and then understand the heart and soul of society.
Thank you very much, Adol Mog, and I remind me once to show you, to take you to visit the Bismarck Denkmäler in Germany, and then it will be very interesting to hear your analysis. I now turn to Professor Arieh Naor of the Ben-Gurion University. Please, Arieh.
Thank you. I would like to touch upon 2 or 3 points relating to more to current affairs than to old history. But you cannot analyze anything currently without any reference to history. So I'll start in 1967. During the war, the Six-Day War of 1967, the Israeli side...
Arieh, if you may interrupt me, Arieh Naor was the secretary of Menachem Begin. Essentially, he ran the government and even the Lebanon one, and you'll come to that. Yeah.
He was the cabinet. I was the cabinet secretary at the time, but it has nothing to do to my academic position. So in 67, the Israeli side had the image of the good guys. The Arabs had the image of the bad guys because of 2 main reasons. Reason number 1 was that the whole crisis started by a Soviet initiative. The Soviets were conceived as the bad ones, of course, and they backed the Arabs, so they were to be blamed. And the reason number 2, Arab rhetoric during the crisis, before the war, was that we Arabs are going to throw you Jews to the sea. And that gave an ultimate justification to the Israeli counterattack. We were conceived as Davids, and they were conceived as Goliaths. Basically, nothing changed since then. David is David, Goliath is Goliath. What has been changed is the fact that we occupy territories populated by Palestinians, and they don't want us to be there. I can understand them, although I personally, when I was younger, and my sons now, fight them from time to time, but I can understand it. This causes a major problem for the Israeli side, in spite of the fact that we were ready to trade the territories for peace. And it almost happened. And in the last minute, everything turned upside down. In spite of that fact, we continue to have now the image of Goliath, and they have the image of David, and therefore, whenever one watches war image on television, it is automatically translated into concepts of David versus Goliath. When you saw this young kid with his father captured by crossfire, nobody would stop and ask himself or herself for a minute, who shot the boy? It was automatically understood that the Israelis shot the boy. Otherwise, it would have caused a cognitive dissonance. I'm not sure that this was the case. I'm sure that in the war of images, it is essential to clarify things of this kind and to explain it. But you know, we had in Israeli governments a very clever gentleman who was in charge of government information. His name was Israel Galili. And Mr. Galili used to say, it's an either-or question. Either you succeed or you explain. And unfortunately, right now, we have to explain. This is one point that I would like to touch upon, and the other one is that it seems to me that international law is not well equipped to deal with problems of fighting terrorism. Ever since the Roman Empire, through the Middle Ages, especially since Hugo Grotius in the 17th century and his concept of jus gentium, the law of nations, the basic concept was that there would be two armies fighting each other. In that case, demolishing houses, for example, is a crime. But when you have to fight terrorism and the terrorists hide in a house, how can you fight terrorism without demolishing the house? You cannot. You can give up or give in. Some of us don't want to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Naor. And last but not least, of course, Professor Dovshin Ar, please.
Thanks, that's the best.
Okay.
Yes. Last, but which means that I will repeat a few of the words of wisdom that have been said here. I'd like to elaborate on some of the ideas exposed here. And the first would be that a picture is really not worth 1,000 words. Rather, a picture can have 1,000 meanings if presented out of context, as Paul Frosch mentioned, or if ordered in a certain sequence. Therefore, it's unacceptable to suppose that images or pictures have lives of their own. I don't deny the importance of pictures, but if we talk about an iconic turn, I would say that we are talking about an iconic turn not in a sense of the image exclusivity, but in the sense that images are necessary or are not really taking over, but they are becoming a part of the discourse which is being used, especially in war, and therefore we talk about war of images and not necessarily only about images of war. And I would like to give you some examples. In the 60s, during the Vietnam War, one of the things that always puzzled me was the constant talk about the Mekong Delta. And some of the older or not so younger participants here, I'm sure they don't know exactly what the Mekong Delta means, because they did not have the means to show us the complex nature of how this what was being done and how is this part of Vietnam is structured. And therefore, drawings were used, diagrams were used, and usually these descriptions are not really very good. Therefore, I think now we are fortunate to have a possibility to have better pictures, instant pictures, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, let me give you another example. Last week, there was a soccer game in this country between a team imaged as an Arab team called Bnei Sachnin, the sons of Sachnin, and between Hapoel Haifa, which was pictured as a Jewish team. It so happens that Bnei Sachnin won, and they have won the Israel Cup in soccer. And I was very happy about that, like many of us liberals. So I went to comment this with a friend, Amir Ben Porat, who Avishai knows very well. He's an expert. He's a sociologist, expert in soccer. And I say, Amir, look what a wonderful sign we have, what wonderful image, Bnei Sachnin lifting up the cup and so on. So he says, what are you talking about? In Hapoel Haifa, the Jewish team, there are more Arabs than in Bnei Sachnin. Okay, so an image may be really misleading, like the following images I want to show you. Do you know?
One thing is clear, Maccabi Tel Aviv, the champion of Europe, have about one Jewish player, Israeli player that plays on the first half, couple of blacks, Croatian, Lithuanian, the same thing.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter.
Okay, right.
What matters, what it symbolizes.
Anyway, this is another example. I don't know whether any of you can recognize this boy. No words. This is just a picture. He was mentioned before. Muhammad Adura. And it's, for some people, it's even not very clear what's happening here. So I think when we have this, the picture becomes clearer. In other words, the picture is really not worth 1,000 words. On the other hand, let me show you this. Is this a good guy or a bad guy standing near the fence? In other words, the picture on itself is not really enough. It's very important for us to see the colors. It's very important for us to see the fence. But this is presented as a good fence, and this is what the words are bringing up. What I'm trying to say is that modern imaging and transmission technologies allow the media, particularly television, to transport events live on air from the real field to an image land, depicted and populated in accordance with media interests. The US media in Iraq and large chunks of the Israeli media in the Intifada are very good examples. And the more these technologies advance and capture the television world of news and fiction, the more they allow the media to keep us from becoming educated, like Steffi said, selective, critical readers and viewers, turning us into image hostages and clients of too much imagery and too little insight. I'd like to show you this. To my mind, and this was mentioned before, to my mind, text and context, particularly in the news coverage of war and peace, should always accompany the pictures, not necessarily 1,000 words per picture. But we can see how a simple picture, when analyzed deeper, becomes, sorry, we were hoaxed, and the editor is fired. Otherwise, we might become part of a world that made Jean Baudrillard ask, do wars really happen, or do we just see the sights? Do we have to see the facts, or are the images enough? And finally, I'd like to ask you, how many words is this picture worth? It's exhibited, we didn't have the time to see Building 34, which is a building where there is a good exhibit of optical effects. But I would like to ask you, how many words is this picture worth? It's called Paris Sharon. Difficult to see, but it's a combination, a juxtaposition of Paris and Sharon, which I found it quite important to be seen these days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. And I just want to add just one more remark to things that Dagmar Engel and Ari Naor said, that we are talking about, and you are talking though about pictures and explanation, and sometimes we are talking about the tyranny of pictures, the terror of pictures, diktat of pictures, and you were talking about pity or empathy. Sometimes we talk about the politics of pity, the politics of empathy. Not only that the picture produces this empathy or a pity, but there are also, we should remember, the politics that really create a frame, a societal frame for this kind of civil development. I would now like to open the discussion, and okay, so first the panel, and then we'll open it up.
I don't feel like a panel member in the moment. The two of you really offered some media critic, and we are not we are not broadcasting out of nowhere. I think every democratic society has the media it deserves. It's when the colleagues in Israeli television are doing 8 o'clock in the evening a story about an event in the morning, and they are doing it like a raw cut. They are doing it because the audience is drawn in. When you're doing an analysis piece, and you do every single evening an analysis piece in the beginning of your news show, you're sitting there and analyze the topics for maybe 5 people who were as brainy or as at an interesting at a place where they can just have the time and the knowledge and just to listen to that. But usually, I mean, news is sort of business. And what we are fighting for is that the business, the commerce aspect isn't the main aspect, but it is one aspect. It has to be paid somehow.
Sure. So, I take some comments from the audience. Yoav Toker, our long-time correspondent in Europe.
Yes, there are so many interesting things said here. I've been watching what is happening from Paris for a long time now, which, on top of many other issues that were mentioned here, actually has a special attention drawn to the aesthetic part of both news gathering, information, the way it is being done, and the way French pensée used to link all that to both ideological and the conceptual things. What perhaps we should mention here to accompany what was said is actually that usually within the journalism sphere, the problems are presented in terms of were the facts objectively presented? Was the actual situation of the conflict, of the incident, of the position making objectively, correctly presented? Whereas what we see over at least the 15, 20 years, and not necessarily only in the electronic media, is that the real demand is not really for facts, it is for emotions. And professionals do consider that. And let it be the case for the written press, which has certainly different kind of objective demands professionally, or the audiovisual ways of communication. The demand within the public and within professionals is that for emotions. And emotion is not necessarily a problematic term. It becomes a problematic term when a large part of the circulation of the information has to correspond to this kind of demand. And when I say demand, I don't only mean the commercial aspects of things, because this is the way you sell papers, this is the way you make audience on TV shows. I mean, conceptually speaking, people do look for emotions, among other things, in order to better understand what is at stake in terms of conflict. Let it be a territorial conflict, like the ones we experience for generations now in Israel, but also an ideological conflict. The conflict here is not only territorial. The conflict in Rwanda was not only territorial. The conflict in Iraq today is not at all territorial in a way. So the search for emotions and the search for answering on terms of emotions is in a way equal on both sides of the professional offer and the public demand, regardless of different equations that are corresponding between those two sides of the barriers. So this I believe should be looked at, I would say, in a more relaxed way, without just naming any emotional criteria as something which should be somehow inferior to the proper search for fact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
I think that's a very good point, but the emotion gets problematic because it's tied to a quest for meaning. People want to understand, and they understand through emotion, and the problem here is just a lack of knowledge that prohibits people from going into a rational analysis. And so that's basically a problem. You see events from all over the world, but you don't know anything about the underlying causes of these events.
The digitalization of images brings
much more power to pictures and makes it global and everywhere present. And I think that's something that we just learn to understand. And I think it is important that we all understand the power of it and also how we deal with it. What Steffi said earlier, it's about education, how to deal with this new revolution, basically, of these images, how to deal with them, how to interpret them is very important. But I also think it's too easy what you, Mrs. Engels, said, that we just make business as media companies and, who cares? We just show pictures, and when we get more public, attention with it and make more business with this is great. I'm a financial investor myself. I'm just looking to make money if we make it really easy, But still, there is moral to society, and I think it's for all of us, to understand that new revolution and to deal with it and to find a new way how we can learn to interpret these pictures, and especially these who brings pictures in the world needs to understand the power of it, and that's an important statement I want to make.
Just to add to what you just said about short-term gain and in investing something that occurred to me, despite all the talk about the importance of images and the interpretation of images, how we are flooded by pictures and photographs and video clips, etc. There's one thing that I think that occurred to me concerning the Iraq prison torture pictures. It may have been a coincidence, but maybe it's not. There's two aspects to breaking those news. Once, the pictures were accompanied by very thorough reporting from Seymour Hersh. I mean, this was not just pictures, it was a very long, in fact, a series of reports in, and then now I come to point two, in a magazine that by itself has a very high reputation, and also which rarely publishes any pictures at all, the New Yorker. So if you publish current photojournalistic pictures in such a source, it's a totally different story than when you publish it in a tabloid that publishes 5,000 pictures every day anyway. Now, this is just to add, or maybe to make the argument for journalists who work within a certain framework, which developed a brand for being something. In the case of the New Yorker, for being a serious medium, just as, let's say, when The Economist calls in a cover story, in a headline, for the resignation of Rumsfeld, that's a different story than when, any tabloid does. The argument is for the quality of the source. Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I have three interventions. Exactly a week ago, we had our Board of Governors, and we have a discussion here. It was a town meeting about the future of the Jewish people that I moderate. It opened with Edgar Bronfman, but then Amos Oz says certain things, and I will start with Amos and come to the point that was raised here about myopia and the question how you encounter superficiality and short-term greed for long-term accountability and certain aspect of morality. They try to define what is basically a Jew, something that you can do. And Amos, Oz, that believe in the words, say that to be a Jew is essentially to argue in Hebrew, because it's a collection of arguments. I don't know if that's, I'm putting it here because I agree with the Burdas of the world, that with all due respect to my friend Amos Oz, I don't think most people read most of the great books that we grew up. I don't know if anybody for current generation read Tolstoy, if they read Dostoevsky, etc. Very, very few people. So people essentially, the images are winning the words, with all due respect. I saw in the paper of Idiot Achronot, the 100th culture maker in Israel. Amos Oz is not in the 100s, he's out, and I saw my friend Zvika Hadar from Beersheba #1, some of the popular images. So clearly that the images are winning. So that's point number one. The dilemma for me, and I discussed it with the boss who's answered, on capitalism today, because that's the key issue, what I think Dagmar also said. If the objective function of the media, and in general now the modern capitalism, in the media is to maximize the number of viewers in the rating in order to maximize the amount of money, often if you solve this maximum problem, it leads to the lowest common denominator and a highest degree of stimuli. Now the question comes on that goes on negation for not only morality, but for long-term accountability, for the environment, for justice, for enlightenment. What is the decision? You lose some money on the short term, in order to be responsible for the long term, and maybe the director is moving you from office because somebody is getting more exciting and more brutal and not that rational is doing the game. That's our dilemma today, and for me it's even stronger for political leadership, because the world always been run by small groups. The question of the group that led it at time were more enlightened or less enlightened. You know, the Jefferson, the Adams, yes, I said the Ben-Gurion and the Churchill. Today, David Ben-Gurion won't be elected in the primaries on Beersheba. He was not talking well. He won't be a TV personality. And today, most of the people that run for politics, some of them have no much substance, but they have all these PR agents that tells them how to talk, and I won't mention names so I don't get into trouble, but that's the culture that is threatening the universe. So the question is, on one level, say we want to have long-term accountability. We want to fight for social justice, and Dagmar is right, that also the fact that information is public has positive value. But I think the myopia of the universe, the fact that capitalism doesn't have anymore the Protestant ethic, that essentially was you respect people if they work hard, if they save, and in that you create value for the long term. The danger for civilization with the images, because the images are superficial. And what is lacking today is distinction and depth. And the master of the universe are lacking distinction and depth. And the question is what we're doing about that, and it's not simple.
Thank you. I just take just one more here, and then we'll just do a round of answers. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. One thing that strikes me is that we tend to oppose emotions on the one hand and objectivity on the other. Both go together. And you can see that very well when you try to look at what it is that journalists, who are both part of the event and part of its representation, how they themselves try to integrate both things. That is, we have different conceptions of what objectivity is. That is, objectivity changes historically. It also changes culturally, depending on the context. What the French consider objectivity may not be the same as what the Germans consider objectivity. Another thing is what is emotional to certain people is not necessarily to others. What kinds of emotions are aroused is also something that is historical. And I think we have to take all of this into consideration when we're looking at journalism, journalists, ways of relating to images.
Yes, I'd just like to give Dagmar Engel a chance to answer, because it seems that she was at the center of some of the remarks.
The New Yorker already told the story almost a year ago, but without pictures. And the first one who came out with pictures was CBS. They already had them for several weeks and had a deal. I think they had a deal with the Pentagon and waited and waited and waited. And just when they feared they were scooped by the New Yorker and Hirsch, they put them out a day before the New Yorker came out. That's one thing I want to say. And I have to fight for TV, I guess. And I really have to say, not every person on TV is superficial. Is a superficial nothing, and there are politicians who are good on TV and are good in politics. I mean, Bill Clinton, you may think of him, especially when you're a woman, whatever you want to, but he was a great communicator. He was, I think, really a great president, and he was gorgeous on television.
He is.
I mean,
he still is.
So that's what I wanted to say.
Yes, and another thing to Avishai is that, of course, that you know that for years now, the most rated programs on American television have been the best news shows on American television. 60 Minutes and the nightly news shows and others have been always on the first very, very rated programs. Quality is not necessarily an anti-rating word.
David, is it true for Israel as well?
I think so, yes. I think that Channel 2 is winning not because it has more money, not because it's more beautiful, not because it has Tzvika Adar or Kochav Nolad. It's winning because it is producing the better content.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to add one thing about the few remarks here by Yoav, welcome, and by this lady regarding the interest behind images, not only the journalistic duty, but some interest. And I think that this, we journalists, we must bear in mind that our job, our duty is to not to explain, not to overdo, but to bring the public the reality and let the public discuss it and decide. And I want to take 2 seconds to tell you a story, a joke, not about photographs or images, but about words. Once you are crossing the borderline, then you're doing too much. And this is regarding the slogan of the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York on the 5th Avenue. They have for 60 years a banner over the building says, you've got a friend in Chase Manhattan Bank. This was their slogan. About 50 years after they established Chase Manhattan, an Israeli bank, Bank Leumi, opened a branch right across the street from the Chase Manhattan. And they thought about this banner and they thought, this is a very good idea. So the Israeli bank had a banner of themselves saying, you've got a family in Bank Leumi. So after 60 years, Chase Manhattan changed their banner and they wrote, if you have got a family in Bank Leumi, you really need a friend in Chase Manhattan.
Stephanie Chernik has given you the right, please.
One thing I'm finding very intriguing is that we're overlooking some of the ideas around what I think of as a media ecology here at this point, and we're looking at least in the United States, the impact of reality TV, which is kind of almost a sense of documentary culture. One thing I'm seeing is the Internet has bypassed most of the rules and the styles of presentation that we're hearing on the panel. And I'd love to hear more commentary, say, for example, on the circulation of images on the web without any border controls, without any specific sense of narrative control. But, I mean, this is something the United States has been dealing with mostly as the idea of an experience economy. And this is what has made alternative viewpoints like alternet.org or other media websites that actually have video content become far more popular amongst younger people than actually watching the news.
Yes, I think these are very important points, but I think that at our time we'll have to download it to you in a very, very fast rate in order to say anything about them. Thank you for these, and Paul Forsch.
Very quickly, I just felt that the discussion was becoming one in which, to emphasize what was said earlier, that we were falling back on dichotomies between the rational and the emotional, the rational public sphere versus an emotional sphere of entertainment, high culture versus low culture, and also images versus words, which I'd hoped to avoid and which I began to feel partly responsible for because of what I said earlier. What I want to say very briefly is that what I was trying to emphasize is the way that in which the experiential mode of prevalent in liveness is not something that I wish to rule out. I actually think it's contributed very richly to modes of discourse and understanding, not just in news and media discourses, but throughout cultures in the past. And the notion of witnessing and bearing witness, which I have colleagues here working seriously on questions connected to that, not only is in terms of bringing across facts, but also of bringing across the feeling of being there. It's something that's prevalent in many cultures and predates the mass media in many respects. What I did want to say, however, was the way, and I'm going to repeat myself here, was the way in which I think that the notions of liveness and presentness are becoming the default mode of media reporting, partly because of the demands of entertainment, partly because of the demands of 24-hour reporting, partly because the way professional norms have crystallized around the law of technology. And I think that's something that should be worrying us, the way in which not only professional practices are becoming sedimented around liveness, but the way in which expectations of viewers are also becoming sedimented around those very same practices, with very little alternatives offered, although I think the internet is a crucial alternative here, and we don't have time to talk about that, unfortunately.
Yesterday somebody said that the iconic turn was triggered by economics because the cost of distribution of images has revolutionarily been lowered by new technology. I think if we look back in history, it would be more appropriate to speak of an iconic return, because the same thing has happened when Gutenberg introduced printing, and suddenly the distribution of words became cheaper than the distribution of images. Before Gutenberg, mass communication was by images. Like go in the churches and you see the story of the Bible and all this is all told by images. And then we had 500 years of a predominance of texts. And I think all of us are still a product of the text culture, and I feel with you in a regret that, and when I look at papers, the papers with a bigger share of images and less text are usually the worst papers in most countries. But I think there's no way of fighting the laws of gravity, of economics. We have a revolution towards a return to more images and less text, and we will simply have to live with it and maybe look at it more relaxed. We have to learn, I agree with what Stephanie said, we have to learn with a new culture that has a predominance of images. And images, and we need both, as I think somebody said here, we need images that address emotion and perhaps words that hopefully address rationality. And so we shouldn't be too excited about it all.
Yes, so we should, as you suggest, as was suggested there, have not only education for images, but also education for emotions.
We need education for all.
Okay, so
it's a great
a word of caution to Tanya Forte's remark on objectivity and to DJ's remark on reality TV and internet, in which I suspect there was an implication of more objectivity than television. And okay, but I want, let me use it. Anyway, it's not on, I would now further my argument that not only a picture is not worth 1,000 words, but also that pictures are never objective. Let's not imply that in reaction to print, pictures might be more objective, because now we know already that we have problems with that in television because of interest, of course, and now, of course, because of the structure of reality TV, of the internet, which is replacing or coming or joining the repertoire of the media we have here. So the idea of juxtaposing objectivity with rationality or with emotions, I think it really doesn't go together. To my taste, I would give up the concept of objectivity altogether.
I just want to comment. We are at the edge of a new society, at the edge of the information society, ultra-information society, and we have a responsibility. We have a new generation that does not read, neither books nor newspapers. They just communicate by images. So we have a responsibility to teach them how to deconstruct the information of images and to detect the noises, the emotional noises, because morally speaking, we have a responsibility for it.
Yes, so I get now the signal that we must close the discussion. It's just now beginning to be fruitful, we see, but our time is up, and we'll have to be satisfied with what we have. I think it was very lively. I think it was very interesting. I think it was very frank. And I hope, thank you very much for your participation. I thank the panel very much.
David?
Yes?
Here. I'm sorry, can I say something, a little word?
Very shortly.
Very shortly.
Very short.
I'm sorry for the interrupting. I'm a student here in Ben-Gurion. I'm not a journalist or something, so I can say that I represent the public here. As the speaker said, the media goal is to pay the attention of the public and to raise issues and to raise emotions in the public, but I think that you are that close to lose us, the public, in the race. because in my parents' house we have 5 televisions, and here in Beersheba, in my home, I don't have even one, because I think it's a little bit too much for us. It's a little bit too much, all the images, all the pictures. I think that we are losing our sensitive, and I think as journalists, you know that you need more difficult pictures, more hard pictures to motivate the emotions in the public. It's because we becoming ignore. We are becoming, we don't feel anymore because this is too much for us. So as a media, if you want to raise issues, if you want the public with you, you need to be more sensitive to what we feel and where we are in that race.
Thank you very much. So I thank again the public and the panelists for this lively discussion, and I want to call on Professor Shin-Ar.
Yeah, I was asked to thank everybody, of course, and ask the dignitaries who are going to end up the conclusions and the next section to come up here. You want to do it from there, Hubert? Yeah, okay. So after, in 10 minutes, we reconvene here, and
last time in Beersheba you've lunch on the bus. The next year you'll have a proper lunch here. But we'll start with Hubert. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hubert Burda.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to say some words about why we are here and what is the background of these iconic worlds where the program of yesterday and today is dealing with. So I brought some pictures. It's better to talk along the pictures. Or the first one, please. This is from a German presentation. I have to excuse, but you can. I mean, well, it's, you know, look, TVD, iPod, Web TV, Casa, MP3, HTML, Handys. Handys is the only German word. PlayStation, Internet. So you can see what happened when the biggest offense which ever happened to the arts, to the painters, has been the invention of photography in 1825, and from there on, you know, the iconic turn started. And Heidenreich, who is with us, is a wonderful young art historian. He wrote a famous book about what happened to the painters when photography started, and how the painters talked about photography as this is no art. And there's a long, long tradition, pitture sunt illiterati. It's medieval ages. The pictures are for those who cannot write. But the pictures in the church were powerful. And so let's this is one thing. Iconic turn has to do the impact on power, on politics, due to these kind of new imaging. But what do I understand under the iconic turn? If you would have the year 2004, we should not yet. We should add another 10 new devices. And what you really could see in the meantime, and I could see it here, that nearly, not everybody, but many had the cellular phone as their photo camera, and Nokia is already developing more pictures than Kodak, who has been the leader for more than a century. So these change that everybody
had his camera in the pocket, send it and can receive it. I mean, if I think back when I was editor-in-chief, it took about 2 days, sometimes 1 day. We have to develop and so on. And now, you know, it's just a click, send it. And even if the quality is not yet, it's a matter of bandwidth. And so about the function and the power of image, I want to show you this picture. And you have some text in it. This is the famous Roger Sperry, not invention, but scientific research for which he got the Nobel Award on the both sides of the brain. We really have two sides in our brain, and many of the debates about images and words and images, when we speak, we think of imaging. What he said about David and Goliath, it is a mythological image. So if we speak, we think of images. If we have images, we describe it. So our brain has two sides, and the left side is more on text, on language, on discursivity, linearity, abstraction. Yesterday, I think DJ Sposi said I'm a non-linear guy. So, of course, most of our learning, most of the education is left side trained, and the children who are strong in left side become the best. And then you see why when school is finished or university is finished, they sometimes really have no emotional intelligence, no social intelligence. So we have to really to think about what happens in the right side. And the right side is the music, is the emotion, it's dreaming. Oh God, 8 hours, not 8 hours we sleep, but at least 1 deep hour we dream. We deload our brain from images and text, but dreaming is more than imaging. It's in intuition, emotional intelligence, simultaneous comprehension. It's three-dimensional. So, and these two sides are connected with the corpus callosum. And you don't, if you are, in my business, if you have a guy who is very strong on the right side of the brain, and you make him editor-in-chief, so watch, because he's not good with figures and money making, because he is I tell him the dummy maker, you know, always new dummy, new ideas, but don't take one from the left side to make an editor-in-chief, because he cannot tell a story. And if you cannot tell a story, you cannot. What about our friend Steven Spielberg? I mean, you can in the media, if you. It's like a songwriter, if you cannot do this, and this is the beauty to combine it and just describing a song. A song is emotion and text. And so this is, and I want to show you we had a wonderful session yesterday. Avishai and Yossi Vadi organized at the Weizmann Institute, and Professor Greenwald showed us something. And I said that at the Munich lectures we have been for 2 years about the iconic turn. We had Professor Semir Zeki, who was a close friend of him. And Semir Zeki showed us what happened in the brain when you see a piece of the media, and maybe we can get it here. So you see a James Bond trailer down, and you see the brain up, and you see the various centers of the brain which functions for text, for imaging, for streaming video, for music. You have various centers in your brain, and this is what have been said. The images is on framing, and it's, you know, there's really no image without frame, and call it context. And if you can if you cannot get it in a context, you cannot explain the picture. So the various areas we have in our brain, but they are not linear connected. It jumps. It goes from imaging to text to words. It goes to music. It goes to emotion. And see how these functions. Please start with the film. Can we get it louder? Sound. Now what happens in our brain when we have no sound? Yeah. So you hear music and you see in the brain you see the various centers being hit by music, by imaging, by text, and and by crime, crime, and now you see sex. These. So. This is what Greenwald showed yesterday. Well, no, it's okay. You can. You have the imagination. You got the end. So this is what happens in our brain, and I tell you, this is a totally undiscovered continent. A totally undiscovered continent. We know everything on Earth, but the closest thing. Now I look in your faces where the attention is going, and I stop. Can you make it louder now? You see how it changed in the colors, and this is what is working in this is our mind. And what we see here is are the maps we have seen on Saturday evening about Jerusalem from the year 1506. This will be the 100 years. This will be a description of our brain like the medieval maps we have seen. What we have seen yesterday, now you can stop. But okay. So what we have seen yesterday afternoon, what Greenwald showed to us was the nerves in the brain, what kind of sound we could hear. I tell you, this was incredible. It was the same moment when Barnard told me that he took out the heart of a body of the patient, and for 30 seconds this man was without heart, and then he took the heart from another body and put it back. The first heart transplantation, 73, I guess. So this was something that I really got, my skin were frozen when I heard for the first time in my life at the Weizmann Institute the sound of my thinking, of my nerve cell. This is so incredible. And then you could see how you made out of this a squared form. So then what's next? Come on, yeah. Yeah, what we have seen yesterday, this is on imaging. It is, we had this wonderful debate about the war of images and the images of war, and of course this is always a very substantial debate, and it was great and from all the sides. But what we have seen yesterday was on imaging. And on imaging, this is so important because there is only one image. All of you, when you see it, this is the image which matters you most, is when you come from your doctor and you have your lung or whatever being screened and there is no shadow. Huh? Or if you have a heart, you go under a CT and he said, no blocks, no blocks. Huh? These images are the most important for you. These are the most important. And what people, especially here in Israel, are working, this is really on the iconic turn. This is the iconic turn. And I was so impressed, you know, what you could see, the DNA and the cells. This is cutting edge, new knowledge. Why? Because we have a computer. And without the digital information, we wouldn't talk about the iconic turn, because it doesn't matter anymore if you transmit pictures or text or sound or streaming video. It doesn't matter. And of course, all the questions, who controls the media, are questions of the 20th century. When you see the battle in all the countries, who controls television? Because of course television is an incredible power, but loses power. It loses power because people will have their own news on their screen, tailor-made for themselves. Of course they will watch once news just to see what the other people might be talking about, but there's no doubt that like the books, like all other traditional media, magazines as well, newspapers, they are losing influence. And it's, of course, it's an upper class debate of, I don't know, 500 million people, which are, of course, important because they are the elite. But if you see how the images are being now taken on the web, you got some idea of DJ's Pussy yesterday night about this incredible impact. So what we have done in this book here is on bringing the various disciplines together, and this is our traveling group. It's not if we would have only journalists or if we would have only media people, so the debate would turn in a circle. So we have to open it, because I studied history of art and 5 years, and we learned to analyze, and the art historians still believe today that they are the only one to analyze pictures. Okay, they have a good fundament, and aesthetics is very important. We have some yeah, Herr Reichert, yeah. No, lass es, it's too long. It's too long. So, and we brought in here, people from the arts, from philosophy, from neuroscience, because we need this dialogue, we need this debate, which we had for the last 2 days here, and to open this and to see the impact on politics. Bringt es noch? This is the impact on politics. These were the first to really know how to use images. Louis XIV, he really knew how to conduct himself. This man became so famous because he really knew about the power of images. This is a picture which is not, just like a snapshot. This is a kind of mise en scène. Next one. And this is the impact on politics if you just see the impact of images. Next one. And I'm quite sure that the 6,000 votes who the conservative missed has a lot to do with these images televised on August 15th. And so if Mr. Stoiber is not able to understand how to deal the media and how to play with the images, sorry, we had this huge flood in Germany in midst of August in the year of the elections, and the elder at Dresden went above all the borders. And the German Chancellor went there, and he made this kind of public appearance. And the other day, the opponent came, and so this is the power of images. Haben wir noch was? Okay. So to study the impact on politics, on the arts, on society, on media, this is something we want to have as a debate at these iconic turn, and to open the eyes. And just, I tell you, when we started 3 years ago, I had a clear view what it could be, but in the meantime, we have so much to study, to see, and to look in this, and just not to argue and not to comment at the next moment, but just try to describe what is going on. And the impact of the digital revolution is as strong as the Gutenberg Revolution. And the Gutenberg Revolution, which led to this text-driven society, of course, the last 500 years with the books has been a text-driven society, and not the Greek, not the Roman, not the medieval society has been so text-driven as this period of 500 years. But the 21st century will have a new combination, and it's not a debate on iconic turn or semantic turn. We just choose it because the semantic turn has been so long with the 20th century. But it is, as you can see in our brain, it's a permanent ping-pong game between wording and imaging. And this is a beauty, and this is such an undiscovered continent. And I thank you very much that we had these 2 days here and can conclude here at the university. But before the conclusion of that, my friend Barton Brock, some remarks on the iconic turn.
Okay, just a few remarks. As a kind of summary, I would like to focus on the fact that the subtitle over here is always missed. It said, more than meets the eyes. And that means what we are doing here is a kind of critique on evidence, because the development of the civilization, contrary to those of cultures, have been critique of evidence and understanding truth as a fact of evidence. So everything which was that was discussed here was a contribution to this kind of critique, and I think even the public is understanding how one could probably react on this demand to be critical about the evidence of photos, the evidence of images, and so on. And that is by, for instance, quite actually now in Germany, to buy a ticket for the movie of Gibson, The Passion of Christ, and then leave the theater without having seen the movie. By buying the ticket, one shows the interest in the discussion about this film, but one reacts as an educated person by not looking at that what is meant to not be looked at. So the whole imagery of Gibson is, I train you, like the old painters painting the crucifixion of Christ, I train you in looking besides. Looking beside, for instance, is building the context, research for the framing, which is meant. So most of the intellectually elaborated, generated images, for instance, in arts, are meant to not to be looked at. You see, and that's a very important activity, for instance, for a viewer of art in exhibitions.
It's much more important to what you, by your own decision, are not willing to look at, but to think at. And by not looking at it, you start thinking at it, because that's quite natural to the way our brain functions. So, first of all, we contribute to educate ourselves as civilized men by being able to critique every definition of truth as being just a matter of evidence. The second is we have always to keep in mind that the war on images and the images of wars did not start with the new techniques of photography, film, TV, and so on. We had historically many very important wars on images and with images. For instance, Leo III, the emperor of Byzance, started in the 730 years, a very important initiative on which came out to be the most powerful impact action before Luther started his war on images against the Catholic Church, especially against the Pope. So if we want to understand something about what is going on here, we have not dedicated our interest into the special logics of media, because the same war, the same impact, the same political and historical coming out of these affairs in times which did not have the chance to distribute images by printing photos or something like that, will tell us what these questions are all about. Not far from here, the Jewish theologist, let's say Moses, for instance, the first theologist we know, started the discussion about these problems by banning imaging. So why Hubert and others did decide to come to Israel for one part of the discussion, we had others in Munich and so on, was what we are curious about, what will the Israelis tell us about these questions, relaying to their own tradition of theological argumentation about the banning of images, because they are the experts. So they have 3,000 years of traditional discussion about the banning of the images, but in the nowadays affairs, they react like people who have no education, no theological instruments to argue about the questions. And it's very important to go back to these theological discussions about the might of the images and the impacts of using them. Then, fourth, if we want really to understand what's going on, we have to relate to these historical facts without any mentioning of photo techniques, film, TV, computer generating images, but the theological impact. That is the key question, and therefore education means to professionalize in these historical sites the patients as partners of the medical doctors, the viewers and visitors as partners of the artists, for instance, or the readers as partners of the magazine writers, and of course the customers as partners of those who sell useful objects to them or want to sell to them. We have to educate all these groups, including ourselves, being a patient, being a customer, being a student, being a visitor, being a reader. And that means we have to get back to the original focus of this whole discussion, and this is a theological one. And in Israel, everybody could easily have the idea that he would understand more
from this fact over here than in every other society or culture. For instance, with this tradition, reading the architecture we are in here now, it comes out, of course, that we are the kind of neurons as individuals in here, because this is representing the brain. And on other levels of analogy, it's representing the cosmos, the sky, the cupola of the architecture. So we are within our own brain. And what we do here is generate ideas of virtual activities, and they have to become realized. So the images are realizations of the virtual operations within our brains. So we ourselves become the realizations of our virtual activities, the inner psychological activities in our brain. And to have an audience which situates all the participants within their own brain as part of the inner virtual operation of the brain is an inspiring idea. I think it was your idea, as far as I learned, to develop this audience. And this brings us to what we heard 2 days from what we approved every minute in these 2 days, that you need some, over here? Yes. You need some coincidence and co-working of your ability to be passionate and to use your intelligence, but on the experience of the education, you deal with others. This was the general idea of Hubert's activities. As he said, images, like all the other languages, have to be shared. But by sharing images, you create new communities. And the central idea was to create a new community of those like you being interested in these problems by sharing the images which were created here as only indications to very old historical theological debate, which we are forced now to rediscover by using these new media. And they are really new and they are really useful because they force us to look upon this traditional historical theological discussion in a complete new way. The new media force us to discover the impact of history on the level of the present. And that's what the whole conference was all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Brock. Hubert, this was a wonderful 2 days. You're going to be now immediately put on the bus back to the plane, but I want just to say a few words. So you leave exactly, it's 12:20. You have to leave at 12:25 out of this place, maybe before that. I want to thank first Hubert, because when Lord Weidenfeld introduced me to Hubert Burda, you know, Hubert is a energizer. He's a walking, I call it, there is a Burda train, and I was fortunate at this university that to become part of this Burda train. He himself sometimes don't know where it's going, but it's going forward, you know. We hope that with this going forward, we'll capture also what Barton said, passion and compassion, because eventually life, to be successful individually, maybe it's enough passion. But to be successful collectively, you need passion and compassion. And I think we thank you for coming. I would like very much that in the image in Europe and in Germany, you'll take some of these few days, but in particularly on the next meeting that we'll have in Beersheba, and we want to have the top players in publishing, in the media of the world. We want to come because we want, me and my colleague and my friends want to change Israel. Not only through entrepreneurship, but also for the fact that Israel have to go south. We're preparing the project there. Israel have to come to the two-state solution. Israel have to correct some of the things. And we want to have this new image of the dynamism of change in Israel, which is based in the Negev. It was the call of David Ben-Gurion. He was not successful. He believed in that, but we want to do it. So we want now to have the Burda train, and may I add also our president now in Germany, the Springer train, together with you to help us to change the image and also to change the substance of the Middle East and Israel. God bless you. Thank you so much, Hubert.